That was great! Just a little more and you would have clinched it!
Hey, Apollo. I'm gonna step out for a bit.
Huh? Okay. Where to?
To the kingdom of Kurain.
What?
The lead attorney's been decided. It's Apollo Justice.
Apollo Justice.
Sorry, but I'll be taking a leave of absence.
Wait! What do you mean by a leave?
Can you at least give me a reason why?
I can only say that this is something I must settle on my own.
I always had something cross my mind in Ace Attorney with one specific main character, and Apollo is someone I forced myself to like throughout Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice ever since his introduction to his own game. It is really disappointing how Capcom did him this dirty. Having been introduced as a new character in the 4th entry where it clearly says Apollo Justice, I've noticed some glaring issues that I myself, and probably many people, seem to complain about him. But is he really that bad as people say? Because truthfully, he deserved better. The game starts so strong in the first case. When playing in the perspective of Apollo, it's nice to see how he's nervous at the beginning, and it feels like a similar callback on how Phoenix was a rookie. Our mentor is Christoph Gavin, who is very reassuring to Apollo's nervous gestures, and notably you can see the contrast to how Phoenix treats his situation with Mia in a more calm and steady approach, while Apollo is noticeably an aggressive loudmouth through his antics. So honestly, it's good to see some evident disparity. In the courtroom we see more of this, and I love that he has more energy and is overconfident when he finds a contradiction. And when it backfires, he just makes a fool of himself, so I've come to the conclusion that Apollo is more of a goofy protagonist. So it's not a bad start. I don't really see many glaring issues so far. As much as I enjoy Turnabout Trump, I can see where the issue begins with this game. Phoenix Wright is your defendant. My complaint isn't the fact that why Phoenix is in this game, but the climax of him being introduced is shown to us too early. I feel that the Apollo Justice game kinda serves for new players being introduced to the franchise. If people were not fond of starting with Phoenix, why not publish another game but with a new protagonist? But I guess Capcom thought that not including Phoenix would mean people being less interested in playing Apollo's game. Even if you're familiar with Phoenix, this is not the same character we all know and love from his trilogy, because now he's a homeless guy who talks like a whole different person. Like, what even happened? I love the new environment. Apollo's game gives us such an eerie vibe with the dark lighting and music. What I like about in this case is the plot twist. Your mentor being the culprit is such a unique and unexpected turning point, especially for a beginning case, instead of being the usual first witness the game tries to make you as the player think. But this is Apollo's game. First of all, we obviously don't know why Christoph would do all of this. Our relationship with him is kinda unknown from here, so why should we have any sense of remorse to care about what he did if he is being labeled as the culprit? And Phoenix starts taking over the case once we get closer to solving it, so it kinda comes off as unsatisfying. All we can do is just trust him because we're familiar with him. We don't know what type of beef these guys are facing, we can only speculate that it has something to do with Phoenix losing his profession. And we also get introduced to Trucy, so that's also great. I don't know about you guys, but I still like this case on how it was handled. So maybe this type of tension sets up for the next few cases, right? Turnabout Corner is really weird. I mean, not all of it is bad. The opening cutscene shows a lot on what's going on, like the panty thief, the stolen noodle stand, and Phoenix getting into a hit and run. I mean, you actually get to solve this whole case as Apollo, and without your mentor Christoph, we're stuck with Phoenix. Phoenix doesn't take center stage here. The case shows Apollo beginning to function independently as a defense attorney, but it just feels wrong because Apollo just kind of feels like he's just there. The case isn't even about him, he's just here to deal with wacky forgettable characters, so I'm kind of seeing the issue here already. Phoenix overshadows him in his own game. Even when Phoenix isn't directly involved in this case, familiar players already know who he is, and Apollo hasn't yet been given a strong enough voice or emotional anchor. Like, they don't even reveal anything about him. We have Trucy who is just bursting with personality, and Apollo himself doesn't give us much reason to connect with him. He doesn't open up, he doesn't share any personal stories, there is nothing in a way that deepens his character. It's very different from Phoenix, where in Turnabout Sisters he reveals personal feelings like his admiration for Mia, determination to defend Maya, and talks about being classmates with Edgeworth and Larry, and Apollo doesn't get that same emotional effect. But this is pretty much a filler case that's just there to serve for character introductions and development. Like the dynamic between Trucy and Apollo, which is still wholesome throughout. You meet Clavier, who's actually really nice for a prosecutor, and Emma Skye as the lead detective. So Turnabout Corner ends up highlighting the issue that Apollo feels like a side character in his own game. The case almost exaggerates his boring side because he's constantly the straight man to all the nonsense around him. So with that, he pretty much lacks charisma compared to Phoenix. Well, I'm not going to say anything about this case. I'll probably save my thoughts later in ranking Apollo's trilogy cases, but anyway, the only important thing to mention is Lamroir. At this time, we don't know her importance to the story just yet. In the final segment, she reveals that her doctor explained her blindness was the result of an accident. If her sight returned, Lamroir said she hoped to pursue painting. And before leaving, Phoenix reminded Apollo and Trucy that he still had an unfinished secret mission. So Lamroir then expressed her hope that they would cross paths again, and that's it. It's a subtle foreshadowing about her relationship with Apollo and Trucy, so this places her into the narrative so that Turnabout Succession can deliver that reveal. It's still another filler case, so moving on. Okay, for a finale, I still think it's pretty unique. They break the fourth wall in the beginning with Phoenix talking to you as the player. The Mason system is used to reconstruct past events where you can switch between the past and present timelines to understand the connections for the jurors to get the full picture. And this is still controversial as half of it is still about Phoenix's 7-year poker game with Kristoff, and the other is still about Apollo, but it builds a big reveal with the reconstructed events. Even though Phoenix still hogs a lot of the spotlight, there are some important things we can finally learn about Apollo. We get an idea of his bracelet ability, which most likely descended from his biological mother, Lamroir, as the bracelet is a family heirloom and its ability tied to perception, which is something Apollo definitely inherited, rooted into a family he doesn't even know he has. I'm gonna mention a bit of Spirit of Justice lore here, so sorry for spoilers, because in the finale case we do get a bit of insight of Apollo's biological father named Jove Justice, who originated back in Khura'in. Then later she marries Zach Grandmarie, which is where Trucy comes from, and that's what makes Apollo and Trucy half-siblings through their mother. Pretty weird to think that this is true because Apollo and Trucy don't know that for themselves, but it makes up for the relationship and bond they have through these cases. Pretty much, Lamroir lost her memory of someone who she was before as Thalassa Grandmarie and lived as a new person, and Phoenix adopts Trucy after Zack disappears, but he never tells Apollo or Trucy about their connection. So in the Apollo Justice game, they work side by side without realizing they are family, and Apollo's story is pretty much addressed through Phoenix and his hidden origins, which the game hints at, but they don't fully unpack it. The Apollo Justice game sets up an interesting premise where Phoenix's character undergoes a downfall, but Apollo acts as the new rising protagonist. In the final moments, it is Apollo who does convict Kristoff in the end, but it's kinda deliberate even though Phoenix orchestrated everything. The trial can only end if Apollo calls Kristoff out and convinces the jury. So, pretty much to sum up this finale, Phoenix is the one pulling the strings. He set up the jury system, manipulated Kristoff into exposure, and drops hints about his secret mission. Apollo is literally still absent from half the case. Even in the present day trial, Phoenix keeps lecturing Apollo, reminding the player, who is this game about? Yes, this game is still Apollo Justice. His one moment of true individuality is where he uses the bracelet to expose Kristoff, but it still feels overshadowed by the fact Phoenix planned everything. So the game ends okay? Apollo's character arc still feels incomplete, almost like Capcom was saving him for a sequel. Yeah, let's talk about that. Before we were even announced the Apollo Justice trilogy in 2023, I still felt that Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice were their own separate games, and I can certainly say that neither of them gave me an impression that these games even relate to his character at all, other than Spirit of Justice's finale. I'm gonna end it off talking about this game because I think the pacing of Apollo's development clashes with Dual Destinies having 3 protagonists being involved. I mean, it doesn't destroy everything about Apollo because he still makes a cameo in some cases, but that's where the issue stems from. We're still left with unanswered questions, and it's just confusing why do we only address all of this in Spirit of Justice finale out of nowhere. Okay, so let's look at all the cases here. So Turnabout Countdown still follows up with Phoenix getting back into court, which is great. They introduce Athena as a new defense attorney, and Apollo, he's edgy. We're pulling this narrative structure of seeing the climax unfold, but with little to no context on why this has even happened. Then when this case ends, Apollo just admits to leaving the agency. Like, this is such a major contrast of someone we already know prior with such little information. Then in the second case, you actually play as Apollo, And I have zero words for this one. This is another filler case that I do not want to talk about. Trucy is friends with Jinxie Tenma, and that's all you need to know. And it doesn't even matter because she disappears off screen. Looks like Capcom didn't even know what to do with Trucy in this game as well, so that's great. In Turnabout Academy, you play as Athena, and Apollo acts as your mentor this time, but he is constantly thrown under the bus. Even Clavier makes a return, but it's really disappointing in my opinion. I don't like his new objection voice, he doesn't look as charming and attractive in 3D. They pretty much just butchered him, and he doesn't even make a return later on. He's only used for the mock trial. The most notable thing to point out is that Juniper develops feelings for Apollo because he is always reassuring towards her, and it's just cute. In the later games, you also do get to see his phone carrying the Rhino charm, and in the end of the case, she also wears a Lamora clothing design. So is any of that stuff important later on? No, it's not. Apollo still doesn't know Lamora is his mother. Now case 4 is where Apollo truly shines. I cannot express how much I love the Cosmic Turnabout. It finally fleshes out more about his personal life and motivation to solve this case, and it's just why couldn't we get this earlier? What I'm specifically pointing out is the victim Clay Terran. He was an astronaut and a close childhood friend to Apollo. When Clay lost his mother in middle school, he was comforted by Apollo, who understood the same kind of loneliness. Apollo urged him to stay confident and say that he is fine. And the two took turns shouting their names and insisting they were fine, and from that moment they became close friends, sharing their dreams, Clay aspiring to be an astronaut and Apollo to be a lawyer. They both visited the Cosmos Space Center where they met Solomon Starbuck, who became a mentor figure to Clay, and over time Clay developed a deep admiration for him. Even after learning about Starbuck's PTSD from the Hat 1 mission, Clay would forever respect him. Apollo eventually achieved his dream first by passing the bar exam, but when his first case resulted in Kristoff being arrested for murder, Apollo was left with nothing. During this dark period, Clay continued to encourage him until Apollo found a new purpose, and that is working under Phoenix. And it's through Clay's unwavering optimism that he became a hallmark of his character, picking up from Apollo back in their school days through their shared catchphrase, "I'm fine." This backstory got me so emotional that I misunderstood Apollo's character so much. It's just disappointing that in this case, it shows one of the richest pieces of characterization he's ever gotten, and it only shows up in Dual Destinies. It's just a shame that we could have replaced Turnabout Serenade and Turnabout Corner if those cases were just development with Clavier, when really why would it matter if he is just used as filler in Turnabout Academy? Clay already acts as a central figure in being the childhood friend who could have been introduced instead in Apollo's main game as a 5th case, and they can flesh out his character more, and thus the Cosmic Turnabout would be more impactful. The Clay flashback shows Apollo does have a past full of pain and loss, but because it's hidden until later, his character in his main game can fall flat, like he's just the rookie lawyer, rather than someone carrying a personal story. Phoenix's trilogy constantly links his cases to his past with Mia, Dahlia, Edgeworth, and Maya, and Apollo's cases can barely do that until Turnabout Succession, and even then it's left mysterious. But what I can admire from this is that this backstory with Clay shows Apollo isn't just a Phoenix clone. Apollo comforts Clay because he understands what it's like to grow up without a mother, and that's not something Phoenix ever went through. When he yells Apollo justice is fine to his childhood friend, it's both a survival tactic and a promise to himself, as if Apollo's seriousness is a mask he built to survive hardship. And Turnabout Revolution becomes the conclusion of his story, and we can only see where his character goes from there in the future. There are many flaws in leading up to this point, but I think it encapsulates everything about Apollo, which is enough for me to realize that his character has left a memorable impression to me. And at the end of this game, there is still minor references to his original game, as the unknown person talking to Phoenix can only be Lamora, ending Spirit of Justice for her to tell Apollo and Trucy the truth about their relationship. And that is why so many fans and myself admire Apollo Justice. He feels real. His struggles aren't neatly solved in one game, they're spread across years, and sometimes hidden from him entirely. What I can get from him is that sometimes we as people just have unanswered questions in our past life, and the best way to approach it is to ignore it, until the time is right to face it again. I think I've said my fair share of words for Apollo. I've come to understand he is a guy that is just a guy. The time you spend with him in these games, I've come to the conclusion that he is human at heart. I find him relatable in some aspects with his inner dialogue of being a laughingstock and not being taken seriously by others, so he has to deal with the most dumbest things throughout his career. The game definitely did a horrible portrayal of his character that doesn't build off well from his mainline game to Destinies, interrupting his pacing, and that's where Spirit of Justice secures his development, but it really shouldn't have taken this long to address it. He is flawed in many ways, but being flawed doesn't mean a bad character. It's what generates Apollo's personality to create tension and move his story forward, and that is why I have empathy for him. He can act a bit cringe in response to character dynamics, he acts nonchalant of not revealing anything from his past, but he is still funny and wholesome. Apollo Justice is our loser, and that's the charm he carries because he will always be fine.